The Ghost on Clinton Street. Part 1. The Road of Death. Clinton Street, located in Illinois, is one of the most famous haunted places in the United States. Locals often warn those who pass this road at night not to stop their cars, especially if they see a young girl waving on the side of the road. But Mark, a truck driver, did not listen to that warning. On a cold autumn night in 1984, Mark was driving a delivery truck from Chicago. The road ahead was dark. Only the headlights of the car illuminated the bare trees along the road. The fog suddenly became unusually thick. Suddenly, in the white fog, a figure appeared. A girl wearing an old white dress, her long black hair covering half of her face. She stood on the side of the road, her head tilted slightly as if staring at Mark. His heart pounded. A girl walking in the middle of the night on a deserted road like this? Mark slowly pulled the car over and rolled down the window. "Do you need a ride?" The girl slowly raised her head. Her skin was pale, her eyes were dark and deep, and her lips were moving wordlessly. Finally, she just nodded slightly and got into the car. Mark continued driving, but a cold shiver ran down his spine. The girl said nothing, just sat still, looking out the window. But through the rearview mirror, Mark realized something terrible. The girl's shadow was nowhere to be seen. Part 2. Nightmare on the Car. The air in the car became heavy. Even though the air conditioner was on, Mark felt his breath turn into white smoke. The temperature was dropping abnormally. "What's your name?" Mark asked, trying to dispel the eerie silence. The girl remained silent, but after a few seconds, a hoarse, broken voice rang out. "Don't stop. Don't turn around." Mark shivered. At this moment, the car radio suddenly crackled, even though he hadn't turned it on. A static sound rang out, followed by a soft laugh. Mark clenched his fists on the steering wheel. His palms were already drenched in sweat. He glanced at the rearview mirror. The girl was no longer sitting in the seat. He took a deep breath, turned his head sharply. But at that moment, the girl suddenly appeared right next to him. Her face was pale. Her eyes were wide open, as black as a bottomless pit. Her torn lips muttered meaningless words. Her hand reached out, digging her sharp nails into Mark's arm. "This is where I died." Part 3. The Curse of the Haunted Bridge. Mark screamed, slamming on the brakes. The truck spun sideways, sliding across the road. When it stopped, Mark gasped, cold sweat pouring down his body. The girl had disappeared. He looked around. His car was stopped right in front of an old bridge, covered in green moss. The surroundings were eerily silent. But under the headlights, Mark realized there was something on the bridge. Long scratches on the cement floor, as if someone had been dragged away in desperation. Mark swallowed, his heart pounding. He intended to turn the car around and leave immediately, but as he reached for the gear lever, bam! A loud bang came from behind the car, as if someone had just crashed into the cargo. Mark turned around, but saw nothing but darkness. "Is anyone there?" he asked, trembling. No one answered, but a creepy whisper sounded right next to his ear. "You're next." Mark panicked, stepped on the gas, and sped away from the deadly road. But as soon as the car left the bridge, he glanced in the rearview mirror. In the back seat, the girl was still sitting there, smiling. Part 4. Unsolved Mystery. The next day, Mark went to a local coffee shop and told his story. The owner, an older man, just shook his head silently, then handed Mark an old newspaper article. The headline made Mark sweat. 1956 fatal accident. Young girl hit by truck on Clinton Bridge. The article told of a tragic accident. A young girl was hit by a truck driver right on the Clinton Bridge. The driver fled, leaving her to die in the middle of the road. The next morning, her body was found with long scratches on the bridge, as if she had tried to crawl away before she took her last breath. Since then, many drivers have seen her ghost, and those who stopped to help her never drove on this road again.